When Shaquille O'Neal walked into Fairmount Cemetery on that October afternoon, he knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't just a visit to an old grave. He was hoping for something more. 30 years had passed since he last stood on this ground. 30 years since his stepfather announced the move and gave him no time to say goodbye. 30 years since he told himself he would come back and find her someday. And then the years just kept going. In those 30 years, he had done everything. For championships, a PhD, a business empire spread across the country. He had filled every hour of every day with something loud and big and bright. But there was one gap he never could reach. One name he never stopped carrying. It all started 3 weeks before this trip. He was cleaning out the storage room at his house in Atlanta. Not because he had to. Some days he just needed to work with his hands to get his mind to slow down. He pulled out an old cardboard box. The corners had gone soft. The brown packing tape was dry and peeling. On the top of the box, in the handwriting of a 17-year-old boy, someone had written in black marker, Newark. He stared at that word for a long moment before he opened it. Inside were the things a Newark kid grabs when he has to leave fast. A worn-out pair of basketball socks, a yellowed program from a high school game, a thin book about New Jersey history he couldn't remember buying. And at the very bottom, pressed flat against the cardboard, a piece of paper folded into quarters. He unfolded it. Blue ink, not his handwriting. A name, Dorothy Mae Watkins. Below that, an address on Brennan Street in Newark, her mother's house, Pearl's house, written in the hand of someone who wanted to make sure he could always find his way back. He sat down on the storage room floor holding that paper. 30 years. He had carried this paper through every move. Orlando, Los Angeles, Miami, Phoenix, Cleveland, Boston, then Atlanta. Through a divorce. Through a PhD. Through 4 championships and 19 NBA seasons. This paper had survived all of it. He had never thrown it away. He had never looked at it for more than 2 seconds at a time. He had tried to find her. Not every day. Not without stopping. But enough to know he couldn't. He had asked old neighbors on his rare trips back to Newark. He had paid people to search. Nothing came back. But the paper was still there. He folded it back up. Put it in his chest pocket. And 3 weeks later, he booked a flight to Newark. The black SUV pulled up outside the gates of Fairmount Cemetery at 3:17 in the afternoon. The driver cut the engine and said nothing. He had worked for Shaq long enough to know when not to ask. Shaq sat still in the car for another minute. Outside the window, Newark in October looked like a painting someone had left unfinished. The maple trees along the cemetery's iron fence had started turning yellow at the edges. Not bright yellow. The pale kind. The color of something slowly letting go. The sky was low and gray. No wind. But the air carried the smell of wet earth and fallen leaves. The smell of Newark in autumn. A smell he recognized before he even remembered that he knew it. He opened the door. 147 kilograms stepping onto a sidewalk makes a quiet sound. He stood up, or tried to stand straight, because 20 years of playing had left something in both his knees that reminded him every morning that nothing comes for free. He was wearing a gray hoodie, dark jeans, and a cap pulled low. Nobody recognized him right away out here. But if someone looked long enough, they would. There is no hiding a man who stands 7 feet 1 inch tall, no matter what he wears. He pushed open the iron gate. Fairmount Cemetery was not large. It was not the kind of cemetery you see in movies, with wide paved paths and perfectly trimmed hedges. This was a real Newark cemetery. Gray headstones packed close together. Grass that was cut, but not tended with care. A few plastic flowers stuck in concrete pots that had faded from years of sun and rain. The path was narrow and slightly uneven. The ground was soft from the rain earlier that month. He walked past the first row of graves, then the second, then the third. Then he stopped, not because he had reached where he was going. About 20 steps ahead, near the east fence, a woman was standing in front of a grave. He couldn't see her face. She had her back to him. Her head was slightly bowed. She was holding a small bunch of white chrysanthemums pressed against her chest. The way she was standing, shoulders a little soft, weight shifted to her left foot, the way a person stands when they are not standing to be seen, but because they have somewhere they need to be, was so familiar that he forgot to breathe. 30 years. He stood still between the rows of headstones and did not move. There are things that build up over 30 years. Words left unsaid, questions never asked, an absence that was never explained. All of those things were now standing between him and those 20 steps like a wall he wasn't sure he had the right to cross. Then she turned around. She saw him right away. No second look needed. No double take. Not the way people look at someone famous. No open mouth. No reaching for a phone. The way you look at something you once knew deep in your bones and never fully let go of. She looked him over from head to toe. Then she spoke. Her voice was flat. Not cold. Just steady. You still do that thing with your shoulders. He didn't understand at first. Then he realized. His shoulders were slightly hunched. That habit he had carried since he was 16. The habit of making himself smaller so he wouldn't tower over the person in front of him. Nobody in Newark had ever been able to train it out of him. Nobody in Los Angeles or Miami or anywhere else had ever pointed out that it was still there. She remembered. He walked toward her. Her name was Dorothy Mae Watkins, 47 years old, a nursing assistant at Cedar Grove Senior Care Center in North Newark. Morning shift, 5:30 to 2. 3 days a week, sometimes for when they were short-staffed. She had never left Newark. In 30 years, she had not gone anywhere. He stood in front of her and couldn't find words for the first few seconds. She looked different. Of course she did. 30 years is 30 years. There were streaks of silver at her temples that she hadn't covered up. Her face carried the lines of someone who had slept little and worked hard for a long time. But her eyes were exactly the eyes he remembered. The eyes of someone who listens without needing to fill in the spaces. The eyes of someone who is never in a rush. Dorothy, he said. Shaquille, she said. Not Shaq. Not Big Diesel or Superman or any of the names the world had given him over the years. His full name. Every syllable. The way you say a name when you have been careful with it for a very long time. She turned and pointed to the grave in front of her. My mother, she said. She passed last November. He looked at the headstone. Gray Newark stone. No decoration. The name carved into it read, Pearl Agnes Watkins, 1941 to 2024. Below the dates, in smaller letters someone had chosen very carefully, she asked about everyone. He read those words. Then he read them again. My mother used to ask about you, Dorothy said. Her voice was even, not cold. The kind of even that belongs to someone who has said a thing many times in their head before they said it out loud. Once a year, every year, until the end. He said nothing, not because he had nothing to say, but because if he opened his mouth right now, it would come out wrong. Too big, too fast, the way he talked on television when he needed to fill a silence. He let the silence stay. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. Dorothy continued, quieter now. She asked because she actually wanted to know. She said your name like you were still the neighbor kid she used to feed dinner. She paused for exactly 3 seconds. Last year, 3 weeks before she died, she was still asking. She asked about everyone. He read those words a third time. In 20 years of playing, he had stood through the heaviest moments a man can face. Game 7 finals. Last-minute pressure. The weight of tens of thousands of people holding their breath and waiting on him. He knew how to stand through those moments. But some things, no amount of standing can prepare you for. A small gray headstone in a Newark cemetery. For words carved below the name of a woman who had fed him dinner in her kitchen when he was 15 years old. And the knowledge that for 30 years, while he was gone, she had still been asking. He took off his cap. Not because anyone told him to. Not because anyone was watching. Just because some things you know you're supposed to do without being taught. He set down the flowers he had brought, the ones he had carried in for someone else, in front of Pearl's headstone. Dorothy stood beside him and watched. She said nothing. There was nothing to say. They found a stone bench near the east fence. The bench was small and slightly uneven. The paint had peeled in several places. The wood had gone pale from many Newark winters. Shaq sat down carefully. He took up most of the bench. His knees were nearly at hip height because the bench was built for people his size didn't exist. Under different circumstances, he might have made a joke about that. He didn't. Dorothy sat at the far end, straight-backed, the white chrysanthemums resting in her lap. On the other side of the low fence was an empty lot that used to be a playground. Now it was a parking lot for a low-rise building. But in the far corner, pressed against the fence on the other side, there was still a rusted iron frame leaning at an angle. The frame of a basketball hoop that had lost its net a long time ago. He saw it and recognized it before he had time to think about why. He had played there. At 15. At 16. Those Newark afternoons before everything changed. I looked for you, he said. Many times. For many years. I know, she said. He looked at her. How do you know? She was quiet for a moment before answering. Not the quiet of someone with nothing to say. The quiet of someone choosing how to say it. Newark isn't as big as people think, she said. And someone looking for you tends to leave tracks they don't even know about. He didn't push further. Some answers get smaller the more you pull at them. I left without being able to say anything, he said. He had run through that sentence many times in his head over many years. In many different forms. But this was the first time he had said it out loud. In a real place. To the real person who needed to hear it. My stepfather told us the night before. We were in the car the next morning. Dorothy kept her eyes on the rusted hoop frame across the fence. My mother saw your family's car leave that morning, she said. It was early. Still dark out. She said she knew you didn't have a chance to say goodbye. She told me about it when I was 19. The first time I ever asked her about you. She stopped. She said she understood. It took me longer to get there. He said nothing for a while. Pearl had watched that car pull away in the early morning dark. And then she had asked about him once a year for the next 30 years. Not because she didn't know he had gone, but because she knew, and still asked anyway. I didn't deserve that, he said. He wasn't being modest. He meant it. Nobody deserved my mother's love in the way she gave it, Dorothy said. There was no edge in those words. She gave without needing the other person to be worthy. That's what made her who she was. He looked toward the headstone from where they sat, too far to read the words, but he already had them memorized. She asked about everyone, including him, for 30 years while he was gone. The afternoon moved slowly the way Newark autumn afternoons do. The light shifted and leaned. The shadows of the headstones grew longer across the grass. The temperature didn't drop much, but the air changed in a way you could feel and not explain. How long have you been a nurse? He asked. 19 years. Why elderly care? She thought about that question for a real moment. Not because she didn't know the answer, because she wanted to give the right one. No more than needed. No less. Old people get forgotten, she said. Their families bring them in and keep moving. I don't blame them. Life is hard. But some of my patients haven't had a visitor in a week. Some of them remember my name, but not their children's names anymore. She looked down at the flowers in her lap. I can't do much, but I can remember their names. I can ask them if they slept okay last night. He listened without stepping in. There's a man named Clarence, she continued, softer now. 81 years old. Former electrician. Every Tuesday morning, he tells the same story about the time he wired a building in Newark back in 1974. Same story, same details, never changes. I've heard it over 300 times. I still listen like it's the first time. She looked at him. Because for him, it is the first time. He doesn't remember that he's told it. He said nothing. There's a woman named Ruth Ann, she went on. 76. Her daughter hasn't visited in 8 months. But she still keeps peppermint candy in her nightstand drawer. She says it's in case her daughter stops by. She paused for exactly 2 seconds. Her daughter hasn't stopped by, but the candy is still there. He looked down at his own hands. 2 large hands resting on his thighs. Hands that had played in hundreds of games, signed hundreds of contracts, shaken hands with thousands of people. Your mother taught you that? He asked. She taught me that checking on people costs nothing, Dorothy said. But for the person being checked on, it can mean everything. Sometimes it's the only good thing that happens in their day. He sat with that. He thought about Pearl in her kitchen on Brennan Street. The smell of lentil soup and toasted bread. The way she would put food in front of him, without asking many questions. Just slide a little more across the table toward him. Those meals he hadn't known to be grateful for at the time. He had been too young to understand that someone feeding you without being asked is not a small thing. Newark had given him that. And he had left before he ever said thank you. Did you ever resent me? He asked. The question came out before he decided to ask it. Dorothy didn't answer right away. She looked toward the rusted hoop frame on the other side of the fence, leaning at its angle in the Newark afternoon light. When I was young, yes, she said, after a moment. Not a lot, but some. She turned and looked at him. Then I figured out that resenting someone for their circumstances wasn't fair. You were 17. You didn't have a choice. But I didn't come back sooner, he said. When I did have a choice. She didn't deny that. Didn't confirm it either. She just let it sit there in the air between them. Didn't make it bigger. Didn't make it smaller. Just let it be what it was. That was the thing he remembered most about her. Then, and clearly still now. She never rushed to fill a silence. When he was a 16-year-old kid who didn't know how to sit still, she was the one who taught him that silence doesn't always need to be fixed. My mother told me something when I was 20 years old, Dorothy said, after a while. Her voice changed, quieter. The way people speak when they're passing along the words of someone who is gone. I was still thinking about you back then. She sat down next to me in the kitchen, and she said, people leave because of their circumstances. People come back because of their character. That sentence dropped into the October air over Newark and stayed there. He sat with it the way he rarely sat with anything. No analysis, no reaching for a response, just letting it be there and feeling its full weight. People leave because of their circumstances. People come back because of their character. For 30 years, he had told himself many versions of why he hadn't come back sooner. Too busy, too famous, too many things pulling at him. All of it was partly true. But Pearl's words, spoken through Dorothy's voice in a Newark cemetery on an October afternoon, pointed at something that was still there after all those reasons were set aside. He had come back today, not because of circumstances, because he chose to. Maybe that was the part worth saying. The light in the cemetery shifted toward late afternoon. That yellow-gray color Newark gets in October, before the dark really comes. You never left Newark, he said. It wasn't a question. No, she said. Why not? She thought about it for a moment. Not because she'd never asked herself, but because the real answer wasn't as simple as people usually want it to be. This is home, she said. My mother was here. My work is here. The people I take care of are here. She looked toward Pearl's headstone. And I never felt like I needed to leave somewhere to prove something. He nodded slowly. Some people from Newark leave the moment they can. Like he did. Like a lot of kids who grew up here and saw Newark as something to escape. And some people stay. Not because they can't go, but because they understand that Newark needs people to stay just as much as it needs people to leave. Pearl had stayed. Dorothy had stayed. And Pearl had asked about the ones who left. Once a year. Until the end. She was good to me, he said. Those dinners in her kitchen. I never had to ask. She just put the food out. She was good to everyone, Dorothy said. But with you she paid a little extra attention. She paused. She said you had the eyes of a kid trying to understand something too big for his age. He didn't know what to do with that. Then he laughed. Small. Not the television laugh. The laugh of someone who hears something so true they don't know what else to do with it. Dorothy laughed too. The first time since she had turned around and seen him standing between the graves. The laughter didn't last long. But it was real. It was specific. It sat in that October Newark afternoon between the gray headstones and the smell of wet earth and the rusted iron frame leaning against the fence across the way. They sat a little longer without counting the time. Dorothy talked more about her work. Not performing. Just answering because he had asked something real and she was giving a real answer. He listened in a way he rarely listened. Not thinking about what to say next. Not looking for a way in. Just listening. She told him about a new patient. A man named Thomas. 78 years old. Former truck driver. He had come into Cedar Grove 2 weeks ago with a broken hip. People tend to think a broken hip at that age is just a physical injury. But she said it usually carries something else with it. The fear that your own body has started giving up on you. That from here on, you will need other people to do the things you have done alone your whole life. He didn't talk much the first few days, she said. Just stared out the window. I asked him what route he liked driving best back when he was still on the road. He was quiet for a moment. Then he started talking. The run from Newark to Pittsburgh on Route 78 West, the rest stops he used to pull into, the things he saw through the windshield in every season. She looked at him. After that day, He started eating more. He said nothing for a moment. Do you ever see me? He asked after a while. In the people you take care of, do you ever see something that reminds you of me? Dorothy looked at him. Straight. No looking away. Sometimes, she said. People who are very large on the outside, but still carrying something inside that never got worked out a long time ago. She didn't look away. Not bad. Just unfinished. Unfinished. He had carried Newark as both a wound and a home for 30 years and never found language that accurately described both things living inside him at the same time. Unfinished was the closest anyone had come. My mother used to tell me, he said, after a while, not to Dorothy specifically, just saying it out loud, that the richest person isn't the one with the most. It's the person who isn't missing anything that matters. He looked down at his hands. It took me a very long time to understand what she meant. Do you understand it now? Dorothy asked. He thought about that. For real. I'm still learning, he said. The sun began going down over Newark. Dorothy stood up first. She looked one last time toward her mother's grave. She placed her hand on the headstone for 1 second, said nothing, did nothing else, just touched it, then walked over to where he was sitting. She opened her bag. She took out a small piece of paper, not a scrap torn in a hurry, a paper that had been folded carefully. Square corners. The way you fold something when you know you're going to need it someday. She held it out to him. My phone number, she said. Her voice was plain, no drama in it. I've had it ready for a long time. Just in case this day came. He looked at the paper in her hand. Just in case this day came. Not if, not in case there was a chance. Just in case this day came. Those 6 words carried 30 years inside them. They carried the thing Pearl had asked about once a year. They carried Dorothy never leaving Newark and never throwing this paper away. He took it. He folded it back exactly the way she had folded it. Square corners. Clean. And he put it in the chest pocket of his gray hoodie. His hand rested there, and he could feel the paper through the fabric. Then he turned back to face the headstone of Pearl Agnes Watkins. He bowed his head. He said nothing, because some things get smaller when you put them into words. Pearl had said everything that needed to be said across 30 years of asking. The paper now sitting in his chest pocket was the only answer he could give back. Late, but real. Dorothy stood beside him in silence. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. They walked out together. No rush. Along the narrow path between the rows of graves. Fairmount Cemetery was nearly empty at this hour. The last light of the day stretched long shadows across the grass. The smell of wet earth and fallen leaves was still in the air. Newark holding on to that smell the way it holds onto everything, through 30 years and through the people who come and go and the people who never leave. At the gate, his black SUV sat on one side of the road. Another car, smaller, gray, with a long scratch along the passenger door, was parked a few spots away. They stopped at the iron gate. He wanted to say something more. Not a big promise. Not a declaration. Just one sentence small enough to hold its own weight. I'll call, he said. I know, she said. Not to be polite. Not to fill the space. The way someone says a thing when they have kept a carefully folded piece of paper in their bag for years, waiting for a specific day, and the day has finally come, and they know. She walked toward the gray car. He stood at the gate and watched. Before she opened the door, she turned and looked at him one more time. She didn't say anything else. Just looked, the way a look can hold 30 years, and one October afternoon, and a woman named Pearl, who had never stopped asking all at the same time. Then she got in the car. He stood at the gate of Fairmount Cemetery, until the gray car turned the corner and disappeared. Newark in October goes dark slowly. He stood at the iron gate a little longer before getting in the car. His right hand rested on his chest, over the gray hoodie, where the folded paper was sitting. He didn't take it out. Just left his hand there. For 30 years he had carried Newark like something unfinished. This afternoon had not erased those 30 years. No single afternoon can do that. But something smaller than everything he had built, more specific, more real in the way that only small and specific things can be real, had just shifted inside him in a way that 4 championships and a PhD and $400 million had never managed to shift. An old woman named Pearl had asked about him once a year for 30 years. And today he came back. Not too late in the sense that nothing was left. Just late in the way, that means a person who arrives late has to learn how to stand in front of what happened while they were gone. Not walk away, but stand there, take off the cap, and bow the head in a different way. The way of someone who knows what they owe. He turned toward the car. The driver opened the door without asking. He got in, leaned back against the seat, looked out the window at the iron gate of Fairmount Cemetery and the maple trees that had nearly gone dark now. Under the first streetlight coming on, the yellow leaves on the Newark sidewalk looked like pieces of paper someone had dropped and not yet picked up. He didn't reach for his phone right away, didn't call anyone, didn't fill Newark with noise. He just sat there in the quiet. Let Newark be Newark, wound and home, both at once, the way it had always been, and this time didn't try to make it into something else. Then he picked up his phone. He didn't call his manager, didn't call a business partner, didn't call anyone on the long list of people who needed him to be something loud and useful and large. He called his mother. 2 rings. Then the voice of Lucille O'Neill, the woman from Newark who had raised him on dignity before she raised him on anything else, came through the line. "Baby," she said. "Mom," he said. "I just got back to Newark." A short silence. Then she asked, "You okay?" He looked out the car window. Newark going dark the way it always does. Not dramatic, not fast. Just slowly, layer by layer, until the things that looked one way in the daylight looked another way at night, but were still the same city. "I'm okay," he said. And this time, he meant it. The black SUV rolled away from Fairmount Cemetery, through the October streets of Newark, past the maple trees turning yellow, past the corners he remembered not by street names or addresses, but by the feeling they left in his chest when he passed them. In the chest pocket of his gray hoodie, the folded paper sat still. Dorothy Mae Watkins's phone number, kept ready for a long time, just in case this day came. The day had come.